And finally, at number 1, I have Halflings Best Chef. So this is another upcoming crowdfunding project that I've been very fortunate enough to have an early copy of. And this is a dice-driven worker placement game where we are trying to collect ingredients and complete recipes to score victory points. Now, the setting of this game is clearly heavily inspired by Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, the Hobbits and so on. And I have to say, this is one of the most gorgeous games that I've ever played. The visual appeal is off the charts here. From the cover, to the board, to these recipe cards. The artwork is as good as it gets. Truly wonderful visual appeal. But we're here to talk about the mechanisms. And again, I tend to really like dice-driven games. And this game is a really nice stepping on point to introduce players to dice-driven mechanisms they might not have seen before. So at the start of each round, you're going to roll 3 dice. And you're going to be using those dice to allocate to different worker placement spots. And all these spots are pretty straightforward in what they do. So for example, you've got the market where you'll have a random assortment of ingredients. If you're there first and you have the higher pip values, then you'll get first choice of those ingredients. You've got these spices that will be like kind of wildcard ingredients that you can use to fill in the space of an ingredient you're missing. You've got the money spot. You've got these wines you can go and collect where the more different wines you get, the more points you can get, but also each recipe card that you're completing will have a complementary wine, and if you have both of those, you'll get some victory points. You've got these decorations you can collect, which will give you kind of ongoing in-game abilities, or also end-game scoring opportunities. They'll cost money, and money in this game is pretty tight. And you've also got some kind of mitigation spots where you can get these soups, which will let you roll these pips around. Kind of act like your workers in Castles of Burgundy, where you can convert like a 1 into a 6 or a 2 into a 1 or a 3 and so on. And you also have the actual spots to complete the recipes. And kind of a twist on this game, which really does up the tension, is that when it comes to the recipes you're trying to complete, they're not actually in your personal supply. They are on the main board, meaning that they are up for grabs by the other players at any time. So if you're collecting towards something, you need to be very paranoid that that particular recipe could be gone by the time you have those ingredients. There are further twists in this game where it kind of reminded me of Caelus, where all the different actions are resolved in a particular order or a track, meaning that the order in which they're resolved is very important because you could actually reserve your ability to complete a recipe before you have the ingredients, meaning that you're kind of wagering in yourself to get what you need by the time it gets to that worker activation, if that makes sense. So for example, if I'm really missing a vegetable, but I've already reserved my spot here, I might put my thing on the market after, hoping that there's still a vegetable there, and then I would have everything I need by the time it comes to completing that recipe. When you complete recipes, you're going to get some bonus money, which of course is very useful for buying organic ingredients, which are much higher quality and will give you more victory points. But will also let you buy those very valuable decorations I mentioned earlier. You're also incentivized to collect kind of starter, main, and dessert meals. Because for each set you collect or complete these recipes, you'll get some additional points. Again, also collecting all the different wines is going to be giving you points based on set collections, and so on. So it's all very straightforward stuff, but as I mentioned earlier, it does a great job of introducing kind of like drip feeding you mechanisms you're going to see in more advanced games. Of course, that thought process of what am I going to prioritize? When do I need to manipulate my dice? Am I going to take a gamble and go here? If I don't have everything I need by the time I get here, I'm going to take a dissatisfied customer token, which is going to be negative points, and so on. So there's lots of autonomy here on a very simple, introductory, almost gateway plus level game. And for me, this game does a good job of being kind of in a vacuum and again being that stepping stone, so you're not jumping straight into those more advanced games. Again, this is going to be a good halfway point, I think. So think of something like Lords of Waterdeep, what that does for standard worker placement games. This game does that well, or does something comparatively, but with dice-driven worker placement games. I'd say if anything, if I had to criticise, I'd say that maybe the game is a little bit repetitive. Maybe it's a few rounds too long, and also, despite again me praising the fact that it's a good introductory game, I think this one isn't going to have that evergreen quality to it. I think once you've played this a few times, you're going to swiftly move on to it and step onto something more advanced. But I'd say if you are regularly introducing games to new players, this is a fantastic option to have in your collection. Again, not only because it's so gorgeous looking and people are going to get very invested in the way this one looks and feels and the high quality of the production, but because people are going to understand and grok this one quite quickly, but it still has enough interesting going on to to keep them hooked and not get bored. So again, pleasantly surprised by this one. I wasn't sure what to expect because normally I find these recipe fulfillment style games a bit rinse and repeat, and I find them a bit plodding and a bit monotonous. This one, I really did like that upped tension of not having your cards in reserve and really having to invest heavily to guarantee yourself to get the recipe that you want. So again, that turn angst is turned up to 11 with this game, which is definitely what you need for a worker placement game. So be sure to check this one out when it comes up on crowdfunding. I'm not sure exactly what platform it's coming on. I believe it's Kickstarter, but I will correct that if I'm wrong. And yeah, check it out if it doesn't interest you. So that is Halflings Best Chef at number 1.